So this is how the dress is going to look like, but I'm yet to decide what to do with the back, if I should buy a rope or if I should just make one myself for the lacing. But anyways, let's get on with the tutorial. So here with me I have my basic bodice block, and I'm going to be using winifred Aldrich pattern, and it is going to be like the first time I'm going to use this, and it has a shoulder dart, and you can use any pattern you have, any bodice pattern you have, but I'm going to be using this. But if you don't have a shoulder dart on your pattern but you have a bust dart, you can just transfer your bust dart to your shoulder dart by making a slash line to your shoulder, then closing your bust dart. I don't know if you understand, but that is called dart manipulation. So you just do a little bit dart manipulation and transfer your bust dart to your shoulder dart. So I'm just going to split this pattern because I just want to work on my front bodice first. I just recently drafted this pattern, that's why they are together. Okay, after splitting the pattern, I'm just going to work on my front body, and the first step is you have to mark your shoulder to nipple measurement, which is your bust point. So from your neck width, or from your neck point there, you're just going to be marking your shoulder to your nipple measurement, and that is going to be your bust point. So here I'm just marking that down, and here you see that's my bust point. Okay, now the next step is from your bust point, you have to mark your bust radius, which is your nipple to underbust measurement. Mine is 3. If you don't want to, you can also use your nipple to nipple divided by 2 for your bust radius, but I'm going to be using my my nipple to my underbust measurement, and I'm going to mark it round for my bust point, forming a kind of radius. Okay, now that I've gotten the radius, the next thing to do is to contour our pattern, and you do this by, from your bust point, just draw a slash line or a straight line to your shoulder. Anywhere in your shoulder, there's no marks, so you just draw a straight line to anywhere in your shoulder, and that is to contour the shoulder. Then you do the same thing for your neckline, just draw a straight line from your bust point to anywhere on your neckline, and you do the same thing for your armhole, from your bust point to anywhere on your armhole. And guys, this contouring is very effective, and you also draw from your bust point to your center front. When even without overbust tightening, and I do contouring, my bustiers or corsets are very, very tight and fitting. So after drawing the slash line, you're just going to be marking some points. So on each slash line, I'm going to be coming down by 0.25 inches. So from the slash line going towards my neck, I'm coming down by 0.25 inches, or coming in by 0.25 inches. So the slash line on my shoulder, I'm also going to be coming in by 0.25 inches, and I'm going to be marking the 0.25 inches on the bust radius. So watch where I'm marking it. I'm marking it on my bust radius, and I'm coming in from the slash line going through my shoulder 0.25 inches. So the one going to my armhole, I'm also going to be marking 0.25 inches, and I'm going to contour the one going to my center front and mark 0.25 inches on the bust radius, like so. So the next step, I'm going to contour my underbust, and for this I'm going to be using 0.6 inches, or you can use 0.5 inches. So for this I'm just going to be using 0.6 inches, but sometimes I use 0.8 inches if I want it to be extremely tight. So this is, I'm just going to be connecting this to my dart legs, but first the 0.25 inches points that we made, we're just going to be joining that. So here I'm just making it visible so that we can see it, because I'm drafting with a pencil and I want us to be able to see it. So from this point, I'll join to the tip of the line or going towards my neck. So from the 0.25 point, I'm joining it to my neck. So from that point again, I'm joining it to my bust point, and to form a kind of like triangular shape. I don't know if you understand. So I'm just going to do the same thing for the line going through to my shoulder. So from that 0.25 inches, I'm just going to mark it to the end or the tip of that line going towards my shoulder. And from this 0.25 inches again, I'm going to mark it to my bust point. Okay, the video pretty much explains everything I'm doing here, but for the one on my armhole, it's just going to be like straight. I'm not going to be going from point to point, so I'll just mark it straight like so. The one also going towards my center front, I'm also going to mark it straight, so it's just a straight line to my bust point. Okay guys, I'm now going to contour my underbust from the 0.6 inches I mark on my underbust. I'm going to join it to the end of my dart legs like so. So now I'm just going to be cutting through the line and cut the straight line, not the one that looks like a triangle. So I'm going to cut the straight line, so you have to watch the line I'm cutting. So I'll cut it to the bust point, not through. Then I'll just cover that 0.25 inches I marked. But before I do that, I have to slash through one of my waist dart leg, because in order to close one dart you have to open the other. So I'm going to slash it to my bust point. So after slashing it to my bust point, now I can close it. So I'm just going to use my tape to hold this down. So I'll just get my tape. Sorry, I'm taking some time, so I'm just going to hold this down. So I'll do the same thing for the one on the shoulder. Make sure to cut through the straight line, not the ones that looks like a triangle, to the bust point. They are just going to cover it up like so, and use your tape to hold it down. Okay, do the same thing for the one on your armhole. You cut through any of the lines because they are both straight, then you just cover it up and use your tape to hold it down. So you do the same thing for your center front. So I'm just going to be removing the excess paper because I don't really need this. Remember that I newly drafted this pattern, so that's why I have some extra papers. So I'm now going to slash through one of the lines again to my bust point and close it up and use my tape to hold it down. Okay guys, so that's contouring. So I'm just going to make my bust radius visible because the tape is covering it up so that we can all see the bust radius. Next, I'm just going to be redrawing my shoulder because all those contouring altered it a bit. So I'm going to redraw my neckline. Don't worry, nothing changes, everything is still the same, but I'm just redrawing this so that it can be visible and it will align. So after redrawing, now I'm just going to, the next step is to determine my neck depth. So it depends on you. You can use your bust radius for your neck depth, but I decided to come up by 1 inches for my bust radius because I didn't want it to be too revealing. I didn't want my cleavage to reveal so much. I didn't want it to be too deep, so I decided to come up by 1 inch for my bust radius, and that is going to be like my neck depth. Okay guys, now that I've determined my neck depth for my center front there, I decided to come down by 1.5 inches, but I felt that it would be too deep, so I decided to use 1 inches instead. So this depends on you, how deep you want it to be, how much you want your cleavage to show, but I used 1 inch from there instead. So I'm just going to take my French curve now, so making the lines visible. I'm going to take my French curve now, and I'm going to be connecting and drawing my new neck line in a kind of curvy way. Okay, so this is going to be our new neckline. So we're making progress. So I remember that this pattern has allowance, so I'm coming in by 0.5 inches from the armhole and rejoin it to my waist. So this is to remove every allowance on this pattern. So you only do this if your pattern have allowance, but if your pattern doesn't have allowance, then that's fine, you can skip this. So I'm just going to draw it to the edge of my waist here, as you can see me doing the video. The video pretty much explains everything I'm doing, so I'm just drawing it to the end. So we don't need this anymore, so I'll just take my scissors and I'm going to cut this off. Okay, now we can go to the next step. So I decided to come in down 1 inch from my armhole because I actually wanted it to be deeper. So now I'm just going to be connecting that back to my neckline using my French curve, and I don't want it to be too curvy, so I'm not using the curvy part of the French curve. Okay, so this is going to be like my new armhole. So I'm just redrawing that so that you guys can see it. Hope you all can see it. Now I'm just going to be doing my underbust. So for my underbust, I'll use my French curve to connect to my bust point, like so. I didn't want it to be too curvy, so if you notice, I'm not using the curvy part of the French curve. So from that, your underbust, that's 0.6 inches or 0.5 inches, you came in from your underbust, you just connect it to your bust point. Okay, so that's it. So next, I'm just going to be, you'll just redraw your shoulder dart to your bust point. So if your shoulder dart is not on your bust point, you're just going to redraw your shoulder dart to your bust point. So here I'm just redrawing my shoulder dart to my bust point. Okay. So after redrawing, I decided to add allowance to my waist. So I'm going to be adding 0.5 inches allowance on my waist, which I'm going to be using to join to the skirt or whatever you want to put at the bottom of your bustier. So I added 0.5 inches to my armhole, which I'm going to be using to join the sleeves for this bustier, and that's it. And for the neckline, I'm also going to be adding 0.5 inches of sewing allowance. So now I'm free to cut, so I'm just cutting, cut through the contoured part of my underbust, then cut to my shoulder dart. So cut my neckline, cut my armhole, and that's it. So next, do the same thing for the other side. Cut through the contoured part of my underbust, cut my neckline, then cut the shoulder dart, and that's it. So guys, we're done with the front pattern. Let's head on and do the back. So this is going to be my center front, which is going to be cut on fold, and this is going to be my side front, which I will join to the back pattern. So let's head on and draft the back pattern. So I decided to cut off the allowance I added to the armhole of my side front so that I don't have any, I won't be confused. So I'll just put my side front or my side back. But first, before I do that, I remember that this pattern has allowance, so I'm removing it by coming in 0.5 inches from my armhole, and I'll just take a ruler and I'll just connect that back to my waistline. So here I'm just adding allowance to my waist, and I'm using 0.5 inches allowance on my waist. So I'm now removing this excess that we do not need anymore. Remember that I came in 0.5 inches from the armhole, so I'm just removing that. So now I'm placing my side front on my side back so that I can be able to get my neck depth. So that's what I'm going to use to get my neck depth so that it can align. So I remember that from the armhole I came down by 1 inch, so I'll just do the same thing for my front, and that is where I'm going to be placing the armhole of my side front on, so that I can use it to determine the depth of my neck for the back, so that they can both be the same. So now that I have gotten that, I can now redraw that point to my new armhole depth. Okay, so after doing this, I'm now going to determine the depth of my neckline for the back. So I'm just going to be using my armhole depth for the depth of my neckline. So it depends on how deep you want to go, just explore, but I think I'm okay with the depth of this neckline, so I don't want to go in too deep, so I think I'm okay with this. So after determining the depth of my back neckline, I'm going to be redrawing my waist dart to my new neckline of the back. So this middle waist dart, I'm going to redraw it to my new neckline. Okay, so after redrawing it for my new neckline, I'm going to go in by 0.5 inches on both sides. You can also use 0.75 inches depending on how tight you want the back to be. So now I'm just going to connect that 0.5 inches I came in to the end of each waist dart leg. I'm sure if you watch the video you get what I'm saying, because I don't know how I can explain it, but I'm trying my best. So now you just close it. You can use a tape and you can just close that. That's if you don't want it that. So now I'm just redrawing my neckline because closing the dart actually altered it, and I guess I would have closed that before drawing my neckline. So I'm just labeling this my zip so that you guys can understand what I'm going to do next. So that, because this pattern already has a zip allowance, so from that zip allowance I'm going to come in by 4 inches, and that's how open, or from my center back I'll come in by 4 inches, and that's how open I want the back to be. So it depends on how open you want your back to be. So I decided that it was not as open as I wanted it to be, so I then decided to go in extra few inches. So I think I made it 5 inches or 4.5 inches for my center back instead. So I'm just going to take my tape and remeasure it so that I can be able to tell you guys how many inches I went in, and it was 4.75 inches. So that's how open I made my back to be. So now I'm just going to be adding allowance to my back pattern. So add my allowance to my neckline, and that's basically it. So this is going to be my back, so I'll just label this back, and we're going to be cutting 2 of this. So guys, it was so super easy. So you just take your scissors and you cut this out. So that was not much, and this is just the back. Look at how small it is. So we have our front and our back pattern, so let's work on the bottom part of our dress. So here I have a skirt block, and I already have my hemming allowance, so I'm just going to label this hem allowance. So I use 2 inches of hemming allowance, like you all know. I always use 2 inches most times though. So for the center back, I'm going to come in by 0.5 inches, or you can use 0.75 inches. This is to contour the bum area and make it a bit tighter. So now next I'm going to come down from my hip depth by 2.5 inches, and I'm going to be connecting those 2 points together. Okay, after connecting point, I'm going to taper the end. I'm using 1.5 inches. Then for my hip depth, I'm going to come in by 2.5 inches and connect the points together. So from the side, I came in by 1.5 inches, and that's called tapering. So I'm just tapering the skirt. So I'll do the same thing for my front. For my side front at the end here, I'm going to come in 1.5 inches. Then for my hip depth, come down by 2.5 inches, then connect the points together. Okay, so just making it visible. So after that, I'm just going to do the same thing for my zipper pads. Come in 0.5 inches there, 2.5 inches there, then connect, removing that excess from my zipper. So I'm now going to cut this part because we do not need it anymore. So I'm just labeling this back using my marker so that you guys can see it. Next, I'm going to be adding my allowances. So just add your allowances to your pattern. Then after adding my allowance, I'm going to be closing my waist dart because I don't want that to be on this pattern or the bottom part of my pattern. So I'm just going to slash through the waist dart and close and use a tape to hold that down. So I'll do the same thing for my front, but before that, I'm going to determine the depth of my facing, and I'm going to be using 7 inches from my waistline. So don't worry, when we're sewing, you will know the purpose of this facing. So I'm just going to determine the depth of my facing, which I'll be cutting out of my pattern later. So I'll do the same thing for my front. So I'll just label this facing. So I'll do the same thing for my front pattern. Close the waist dart by going to that point, covering it up and using a tape to hold it down. So I'm just closing my waist dart, and for my waist I'll come down 7 inches, then I'll roll a straight line, and that is going to be the facing. So I'll just label this facing. So this is going to be my center front, and this is going to be my center back, and that's my zip. So I think we're done, and now I can cut out my front pattern. So make sure you fold your hem before cutting. This is very necessary. I always say that we should fold our hem before cutting, and now I can take my scissors and cut this out. So this is our pattern. Now we can work on the sleeve. So here I have my sleeve block. You can go ahead and add your allowance to your sleeve pattern, and also add your hemming allowance to your sleeve pattern. And the sleeve, there's really nothing much to do about the sleeve. So I'm just going to be making the center line visible so that we can all see it. But I guess we can already see it, but I just decided to make it visible. So I'm just going to slash through the center line of my sleeve, or you can just find the midpoint of your sleeve and slash, and this we're going to be spreading on our fabric, and that's all. Nothing much. That's all for the sleeve. Thank you guys for those of you that joined me to the end of this pattern, for this pattern drafting. See you next time on the sewing tutorial. Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Make sure to click that like button and subscribe.